In 1969, a single weapon system would fire 63,000 rounds to defend one outpost. But its design was not from the jet age. It was recovered from a museum archive, a technology from 1862. The core problem it solved was fundamental. A conventional machine gun is a chain of controlled explosions, each dependent on the last. One faulty cartridge, one failure to feed, and the entire system stops. The weapon is silent. The soldier is exposed. Dr. Richard Jordan Gatling, a physician, addressed this logic of failure. He believed his invention would reduce the size of armies, thereby showing the futility of war. His principle was not a better single barrel, but a group of them, rotating. Each barrel fired, cooled, and reloaded in a continuous independent sequence. The original design was powered by a human arm turning a hand crank. Its rhythm was dictated by muscle and fatigue. The modern era provided a new power source, a stable, inexhaustible electric current. After the Second World War, the speed of aerial combat demanded an impossible volume of fire. General Electric was tasked with the solution. Their engineers walked into museums. They located the forgotten Gatling guns, covered in decades of dust. An electric motor was attached to the century-old mechanism. The standard M60 machine gun produced 550 rounds per minute. The electrified Gatling achieved 4,000. The result was the M61 Vulcan, a 20mm six-barreled cannon that became standard on American jets. But the Vulcan was too large for helicopters. Its recoil too violent for light airframes. The design was scaled down. It was chambered for the 7.62 NATO round. It received the designation M134. The true revolution was not the rate of fire. It was the decoupling from chemical dependency. A gas-operated weapon requires the energy from a fired cartridge to cycle the next. A misfire breaks the chain. With the M134, the electric motor forces the rotation regardless of the ammunition's performance. A dud round is met with a sharp metallic sound as the mechanism extracts the failed cartridge and ejects it. The barrels never stop turning. Prior to the mass production of the M134 system, American aviation crews in Vietnam confronted a daily calculus of probability. A tactical paradox measured in human lives. How long does a transport helicopter remain exposed to small arms fire? Exactly 11 minutes. The window of descent and ascent. The Bell UH-1 helicopter redefined battlefield mobility. It allowed American forces to bypass the jungle's defenses, but the aircraft itself was profoundly fragile. The aluminum skin measured approximately 1 millimeter thick. It offered no meaningful protection against standard rifle calibers. A single volley could perforate the fuselage and its crew. This vulnerability created a fixed tactical dilemma. Landing zones became designated kill boxes. The procedure was brutally effective. Wait for the UH-1 to descend below 50 feet. Then initiate a coordinated crossfire. The door gunner's M60 machine gun was a gas-operated weapon. It could not suppress an entire tree line. More critically, its mechanism was dependent on the energy from each fired cartridge. A single dud round would seize the action. The gun would fall silent. With the primary defensive weapon jammed, the aircraft was a static target. The pilot faced two choices: commit to the landing and risk total loss, or retreat. With enemy fire tearing through the cabin, the pilot was forced to abort the mission. To resolve the tactical impasse at the landing zones, the solution was deployed not on the ground, but into the airspace over Vietnam. The 7.62mm rotary gun system. From an altitude of 3,000 feet, it began as a visual event. A stream of red tracers descended into the night. The density was so high, individual rounds became imperceptible. They fused into a continuous column of light. The sound arrived second, a singular mechanical shriek. The sound of a circular saw cutting through sheet metal. The weapon discharged 6,000 rounds per minute, 100 bullets every single second. This volume of fire made precision targeting irrelevant. The objective was to saturate a coordinate, to render a grid square uninhabitable. Viet Cong soldiers gave it a designation, the Dragon. Documented testimony confirmed their uniform response to the sound. They ceased returning fire. They began to pray. Helicopter-based fire suppression was transient. For sustained psychological dominance, the U.S. military required a system of continuous area denial. The solution was found not in new technology, but in an obsolete airframe. The Douglas C-47 Skytrain, a transport plane designed in 1941. By the Vietnam War, it was a 23-year-old machine repurposed for a new doctrine of warfare. Its designation became AC-47. The core of this system was not the weapon, but a principle of flight geometry. The pilot initiates a precise left bank, 30 degrees. The gun sight is then fixed on a single coordinate on the ground. The aircraft ceases to fly a linear path and enters a stable circular orbit around this fixed axis. This maneuver, the pylon turn, transformed the outdated cargo plane into a stationary weapons platform. It generated a continuous cone of fire, aimed not at individual targets, but at a designated geographical area. Every fifth cartridge in the ammunition belt was a tracer round. This methodology produced a documented rate of 20 tracers per second. At night, observers did not report seeing individual projectiles. They reported a solid, unbroken column of red light connecting the aircraft to the Earth. The first operational use occurred on December 23, 1964. An isolated outpost was under siege. The AC-47 established its orbit and commenced firing. The aircraft held its orbit above the outpost for 2 hours. The results of the December 1964 missions were not just tactical. They became a subject for intelligence analysis. Veterans of the North Vietnamese Army had survived B-52 carpet bombing. They had endured napalm. But this weapon induced a different class of systemic failure, a failure of discipline. American intelligence officers analyzed captured enemy documents. They translated the pages. The new orders were direct. Do not engage the aircraft. Do not fire. Hide. Why did hardened veterans of the Vietnamese infantry break formation? The psychological pressure of anticipating an invisible cone of fire surpassed the fear of conventional artillery. The terror was not the attack itself. It was the sound. A low-engine drone, circling for hours in total darkness. The sound forced soldiers to the ground, waiting. This psychological effect was documented. The initial sorties fired 180,000 rounds. The weapon's reputation hardened into doctrine. No outpost was ever lost while a gunship remained on station. The platform evolved. The AC-130 Spectre. It carried a new arsenal, including a 105mm howitzer. The Spectre's mission expanded. It became a hunter. While B-52 bombers attacked strategic infrastructure from high altitude, the AC-130 systematically dismantled tactical movement on the ground. It hunted convoys along the Ho Chi Minh Trail. Official records credit the AC-130 program with the destruction of more than 10,000 trucks. The statistical dominance of the gunship program carried a severe operational cost. For the men operating the M134, the weapon was a source of constant physiological and logistical strain. The system's total weight was 85 pounds. This was equivalent to a fully equipped infantryman, demanding a reduction in a helicopter's landing party, a critical trade-off. In combat, the gunner did not fight recoil, he fought torque. The spinning barrels generated a powerful gyroscopic force, twisting the weapon and the operator's body. The sound was punishing, inflicting permanent hearing loss on most crews. Ammunition expenditure created a logistical crisis. An undisciplined gunner could exhaust the entire supply in less than 60 seconds. Fire discipline was a mandate for survival. For the AC-47 and AC-130 crews, the test was absolute precision. They had to fly a flawless pylon turn, locking the aircraft's gun sight onto a single point on the ground. The primary fear was not incoming fire, it was miscalculation. A single navigational error or a misread position could direct the weapon's output onto friendly forces. The environment itself degraded the system. Vietnam's humidity corroded electrical contacts. Dust contaminated the mechanics. A corroded link in the ammunition belt would cause the feed mechanism to jam. What happens when an aircraft carrying tens of thousands of ammunition rounds takes a direct mortar hit? The crew is trapped with an ignition source burning at 4,000 degrees. This risk materialized on February 24, 1969. The gunship was designated Spooky 71. A mortar shell detonated against its fuselage. Shrapnel tore through the cargo hold. A Mark 24 magnesium flare was jarred from its staging. It began to tumble across the deck, surrounded by ammunition belts and pooling hydraulic fluid. The flare's burn temperature is 4,000 degrees Celsius. Its illumination radius exceeds 1 mile. Detonation inside the fuselage would have vaporized the aircraft and its crew. Airman First Class John Levittow sustained 40 separate shrapnel wounds. He was losing blood. He saw the armed flare. He threw his body onto the burning object, absorbing the heat. The metal casing seared his hands and back. He crawled, dragging the flare toward the open cargo ramp. He pushed it into the night. Seconds later, it detonated outside the aircraft. Levittow was awarded the Medal of Honor. Another case occurred on June 18, 1968. Captain Larry Taylor was piloting an AH-1 Cobra gunship. A 4-man reconnaissance team was encircled by enemy forces. No ground extraction was possible. Taylor expended all of his helicopter's rockets and minigun ammunition, providing fire support. The enemy perimeter did not break. Taylor landed his 2-seat aircraft under direct fire, ordering the soldiers to hold onto the landing skids and rocket pods. He then flew them to safety. His Medal of Honor was awarded in 2023, 55 years after the mission. In 1969, the synthesis of industrial and psychological warfare reached its apex. The event demonstrated the platform's absolute potential for territorial denial. At the Vu Coc Hip outpost, one AC-47 aircraft expended 63,000 rounds in a single night. Its target was a North Vietnamese Army regiment attempting to overrun the position. The pilot, Captain Nguyen Van Vong, remained on station for hours. He flew back to rearm, then returned to the fight. The outpost held. The 63,000 rounds of 7.62 mm ammunition represented a total mass of 1.7 metric tons of lead and brass. The logistical effort was immense. The psychological impact was definitive. This event informed a new tactical doctrine. The American command integrated the gunships with Operation Wandering Soul. Psychological operations units broadcasted tapes into the jungle. They contained distorted Buddhist funeral chants and fabricated wails of the dead. According to Vietnamese tradition, a soul not properly buried is cursed to wander in pain. The loudspeakers would broadcast the artificial cries of these wandering souls. Viet Cong soldiers, unnerved or enraged, would fire at the source of the sound. Their muzzle flashes instantly betrayed their positions. The AC-47 would then engage. Spiritual terror was converted into a targeting solution for kinetic force. The NVA could not counter the aircraft directly. They adapted. Enemy units began digging deeper, heavily reinforced bunkers with significant overhead cover. Decades later, in 1987, cinema created a new, physically impossible perception of the M134. The film was Predator. The image was actor Jesse Ventura firing the weapon from a standing position. A cultural myth took root. The biomechanics are unforgiving. At 6,000 rounds per minute, the M134 generates a recoil force of over 150 pounds. This force is sufficient to physically throw an operator backward without a rigid, fixed mount. The system is entirely dependent on external power, requiring an energy source equivalent to a small vehicle's battery. The ammunition for a 10-second burst, 1,000 rounds, weighs between 60 and 70 pounds. The M134 is not a personal weapon. It is a vehicle-mounted, power-dependent logistical system. Why did the Soviet Union not provide North Vietnam with a rotary analog? The logistical infrastructure of partisan warfare could not support it. No field generators, no vast ammunition stockpiles, no heavy-lift helicopters. North Vietnamese forces operated with robust, mechanically simple Soviet hardware like the DSHK heavy machine gun. The two doctrines were fundamentally opposed. American systems embraced technological complexity. Soviet engineering prioritized reliability and ease of maintenance for conscript armies. Soviet doctrine was built on massed artillery and weapons a soldier could service in a frozen trench. The Gatling system's core engineering proved uniquely resilient to time. 7 decades after the original patent, its principles endure. Modernized variants, designated the M134D, remain in active service. They are integrated into Black Hawk helicopters. They are mounted on United States Navy riverboats. The fundamental design is unchanged. Engineers discuss the specifications, the barrel lifespan, the upgraded feed systems. But according to veteran testimony, the weapon's legacy is not mechanical. They recall the sound. Then they recall the profound, ringing silence when the electric motor stopped. The primary impact was documented as psychological suppression. Accounts from the ground report a complete cessation of enemy fire, not from casualties, but from induced paralysis, an inability to continue combat functions. The moment the weapon ceased firing, the jungle became still. This quiet did not signify safety. It indicated one of two states. The opposition had withdrawn, or they were still there, frozen, praying the sound would not return.